New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
It is the Practical Prayer Podcast pre-show on New Thought Media Network. I am Bill over here on this side of the Delaware River, and there's Carol over on that side of the Delaware River, and there's you out there in New Thought Media Network land on social media, either watching live or on the recorded replay. If you're with us live, then you can put a comment into your social media, and we will get it, and then we can respond to it. And that would be everything from a question to suggestion for a topic or a request for a prayer. If not, you can always go to the website at bethelight.com, be-the-light.com. There's a section for the Practical Prayer Podcast on there, and you can put the same sort of comment, suggestion, request in there, and we will respond to it on a subsequent episode. So that's for people who are watching the recording. And then, of course, what we're doing here is we're going to record an episode of the podcast, and that'll go out into podcast land in a week or so. All right, that's enough of that. How are you, Carol?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm so much better than recording time last week when I was exiled from my usual recording space because of the bat that showed up in my office, which turns out had not left. We managed to escort it out of the house on Monday evening last week.
It was around for a while then, right?
Well, it showed up on Sunday night, Monday morning, and it excused itself Monday evening after it got dark again.
Okay.
Because, it took the day shift off, as bats do.
I would have excused myself right with it. Until it decided to leave, we couldn't be in the same place.
Well, that was kind of the idea, but it managed to get out of my office with the door closed, and then it was flying around the rest of the house. So there was an emergency. There was an exodus.
Yeah.
There was an exodus that happened from my house. And
what about Oliver? Did he go too?
He was just perplexed. You're talking about my poodle. Sometimes stuff goes on, and it's so far outside of his realm of familiarity that he just stands there and looks. So he was doing that because he just did not get it. Why is there a bird in our house at night and it's flapping and it's swooping and behaving differently than the birds out in the backyard do during the day? So he was just a little overloaded. Of course, having mom shrieking at him to get out of the house probably didn't help his mindset at all. Yeah, that's what it was. So the bat left, and I got back into my office, and all is well with the world. I have a friend who probably 3 or 4 times a year gets a bat in his house. So he's much more casual about it than people like you and me. It's like, yeah, here's what you do.
So you'll tell me what to do just in case it happens. I can't see it happen here, but never know.
Yeah. The second time it's much easier. The first time there's so much adrenaline that you probably want to call the bat guy and have him go extricate the bat. I think there's a lot of money to be made for alarmed first time bat home occupiers. Anyway. So we're better now. I'm using the happy big Mr. microphone in the studio setting. So the guy who produces the podcast will be even happier.
Okay.
And you and I came up, we both thought of the same topic for this week's show.
Yeah, the difference between practical prayer and traditional prayer.
Yeah.
Is that the way that's how it was in my notes, actually, and the way we came up with it. Just for those who are interested, I was reviewing the topics, and I went all the way back to 2001, which was a surprise in itself because, I know the number of episodes, but to actually see the date, I thought, wow, we've been doing this a bit. And,
there's
just
quite
just
a scroll
trying to
there.
Yeah. And I thought if we made a list, it must have been God inspired. So let me honor it and see if we covered some of the stuff, So it was a really nice trip backwards.
Yeah, and the reason that I wanted to do this is because, they say that lightning never strikes the same place twice, and my observation is that's because the same place isn't there the second time because it got hit by lightning.
That's
and
good.
You have changed. You, in the intervening time, have changed, and my answer might have changed too. So I just want to do the same question again, and see where we are level set wise with that.
Okay.
So we're going to do a practical prayer podcast episode?
I'm ready.
Okay. Everybody who's there watching on New Thought Media Network, here we go.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Bill Marchiony.
We have got a wonderful episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast today, and it's one of those things where it's more evidence that there's one mind, because I came up with a thought earlier today of, here's a topic that I'd like to revisit on the Practical Prayer Podcast, and it got on before the show started, and it turns out that Carol, through her own process, had come to the same topic that we covered 3 years ago, and wanting to do it for her own reasons. So we are going to follow God's guidance and do what we've been told. We're just saying yes to this one.
Okay, I like that.
And the original episode, which was very early on, probably in the first 5 or 10 episodes of the podcast that we did, is what is the difference between a practical prayer and a traditional prayer? And I recall when you originally asked that question, I was stumped. And it's not because I don't know what a practical prayer is. It's because I didn't know what the characteristics were of a traditional prayer. So I got educated along the way, and I have been speaking, pontificating, bloviating about that when people will listen to me ever since. And my interest in this was, where did that land with you, and how has that evolved for you?
This was probably, without a doubt, the most difficult thing for me to understand. I won't say transition. Excuse me, I'm a little bit hoarse today. I won't say transition. Maybe that's the right word. I don't know. But the practical prayer was just really rough for me. And I'll tell you how rough. For those who are listening, because I was in a class, one of the first classes that I took, in a whole bunch of them with you, and each of us had to do our practical prayer at the end. And it's no getting around it. Like somebody had to do one each time before class started. I could get around that, and you were kind enough not to put me on the spot because I know you knew I was having difficulty. But at the end, you got to do this thing to get your grade to be able to get.
And you, being an overachiever, needed to get the grade.
Yeah, well, look, I wasn't repeating the class. If I took it again,
and you're not going to get
it
an
would be
incomplete. That is not Carol. No.
No, So, I I did what I needed to do to finish it, and I'll be honest, I was still not there, but I did what I was supposed to do. I followed the rules. I followed the steps, but and I struggled all the time, all the way through. And that has been, and I'm going to be, I'm being really transparent here. That has been part of me not being involved with a lot of things that I could be involved in, because if somebody would ask me to do a practical prayer, I'd just pass out. I'd either pass out or. Because it's not that I didn't believe in prayer and all of that, but there were some disconnects in it, and I thought it was me. And so let's just fast forward to now, and I had to figure out what was the problem, because I'm at least as smart as anybody else. So why were other people just flowing with this, and I was stumbling? And I discovered what the problems, plural, are with it. And
training?
one, well, you were the trainer. You couldn't do any more.
No, I'm
than
talking
you did.
about being trained in doing the other way. Being trained in traditional prayer just gives you so much muscle memory that it's like, when you're swimming laps and you're used to breathing on the right-hand side, you try breathing on the left, it's possible you can just drown. It's not because you don't know how to swim anymore. It's just that's not the way I do it.
Yeah. But you know what? It really came from something else I was looking at that you did. I'm not sure whether it was, because I do review sometimes the Sunday. If I'm not able to be there, I'll catch it on the replay. And I can't think if it was that or a class, but it was very recent. And you were talking about subconscious mind and subconscious thinking, and that not in relationship to prayer or anything else like that. And I thought, that's it. It's in my subconscious. What is it specifically in my subconscious that's preventing me from resonating this way? Because I do comparative religions, and prayer is a part of all of that. And I thought, this should just not be screwing me up. And what I landed upon is, number one, it's your perception of God. And if you're not clear on your perception of God, you have no way of knowing. Faith doesn't work because you don't know what to expect. And so in the practical prayer, I felt that there was an assumption that we understand, or the person praying understands, that God is within. That's number one. And that God is for us and says yes and is unconcerned about sin. And, so there's a whole myriad of stuff that you got to take your time and go through this, because it's going to hang you up, and then get to the realization step. You can't do that in practical. You cannot do that because it's too much positivity in it. It's too much expecting that God is fair and just, if you want to use those terms. It's just ridiculous. You can't. You have to get a clearer perspective on God. Even if you don't buy into it, at least understand it. So that makes the rest of everything make sense. And that's what hung me up. Because, if you're thinking that God is out there somewhere, you can't do a practical prayer.
Right.
Because you get stumped at the third step. You can't do it.
The third step, if you're not aware that God abides within, and that God is all there is, and that God is always saying yes, then you get to the third step. It's just an affirmation. It's just like, doing a self-help manifestation. It's like, I'm prosperous, and you may wind up being prosperous, but it's not because spirit is making you prosperous. It's because you happen to believe it was possible anyway.
Well, yeah, you're also giving a lot of credit to that because if you come from a God is mean and a judgmental entity, you can't manifest anything because you don't deserve it.
Right.
It's just not okay. Um, it's just not okay. So there's so much that I had to address, but I didn't know I had to address it until I saw it. It's God. God is. I have come through so many difficult situations in flying colors. Just I've been really, really fortunate in whatever word you want to use. So what did that mean? Did that mean I was lucky? Certainly didn't mean I was good. So I had to say, well, okay, God doesn't care if I'm good or not good, according to whatever definition you want to use. Eventually you get rid of that. Eventually. But I think coming to a place where you say God really doesn't care, that's probably the first step. And what do you mean God doesn't care? God loves, God cares about everything. You got to tire yourself out, No.
Yeah, that's tricky for a lot of people to understand. Well, and that's one of those really abrupt things that I will say is that God loves you so much that God doesn't care at all what happens to you. And people are like, what do you mean God doesn't care? What I mean by that is God cares completely. God cared so much about you and me and everything that it shared itself as its creation. Everything is God's perfect expression unfolding. So that's the level of caring. What we mean when we say God doesn't care is that God doesn't have a horse in the race about what's going to happen. Marry her, don't marry her. Make a lot of money, live in a tent. It's not going to change God at all. God is having that experience of richness or poverty through us and as us. And in order for that to be the experience, somebody's got to have it. So when we volunteer, great, that ticks it off the list and somebody else doesn't have to. Or maybe lots of people are going to because it'll be very popular to be whatever it was that we said. And there's no limitation in God. It's not like you can't have 3 really rich people. If one of them is the richest in the world and somebody else comes along and gets that rich and goes past him, does that change the second one? No, he's still rich, or she.
So you almost have to figure out where to start on something like this. And I'm an advocate that you really can't do it by yourself. You probably can, but it'd be terribly difficult. You need to be able to talk things through with somebody, whether they're experienced in New Thought or not. Just on an intellectual level, talking through things with a person, it really doesn't make sense that God cares about the outcome. And I'm trying to say this in such a way, because I know people get confused when they hear this, but it's about free will, your choice, cause and effect, and your choice. You have to take all of that into perspective. And once you get I take all the evidence to court, and then we can, then we can make an assessment of what we have. And it takes time. It took me time, and I had to say it's okay that it takes me time, which is cool because I take time with everything. But this particular thing, I kind of wanted to hurry up and try to understand it. And so here we are back to that question again, the difference. And it's not a difference. I don't think it's a difference in the prayer as much as a difference in the understanding of who God is in your understanding. Therefore, this is what you can expect, which is another word for faith, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you start a prayer by saying, oh God up in heaven, I know that I am unworthy, but I beseech thee, just this once to please X, Y, or Z, save mom's life or give me a pony.
Yeah.
Whatever it's going to be. Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please. And if you do, then I promise I'll do whatever. I mean, those prayers might feel good, but they don't work.
Oh God. Okay, fine. God is out there and they're fine. Doesn't really matter.
Right.
But the formula, and one of the formulas that a lot of people recognize, is that you acknowledge God first and then comes confession. That's the problem right there. I got to confess. I'm not confessing good stuff, right? I'm confessing. I mean, you can, but I'm confessing crap, right? So I'm saying, I'm acknowledging to God that I'm ridiculous, I'm a worm undone or whatever, and I did this and I did that. That cancels out anything because you're asking God to forgive. And so then I got to figure out if God can forgive such a thing, and can God forgive it in time enough for me to, be able to go on with this prayer. It gets complicated, and it's just
Oh,
so
it does.
unfair to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah.
it's interesting, the confession piece of it, because there's something to it. And with all of this, it's not like we can just say, oh, this is all completely wrong, or this all completely doesn't work. If you start by acknowledging that there's an infinite creative power that creates everything, and that has created me, and I'm using that power to create my life, the confession piece of it is like, well, my life is not going the way I want it to be going so far. So I need to let go of whatever belief, whatever attitude, whatever thoughts I've had that have created my life up until now. So that's the surrender, that's the confession, that's the releasing part of it. I'm not doing that anymore. What I'm doing instead is this. And that's where we're going to claim our good. Okay, so this is the problem we've had. One of my favorite phrases is up until now. So this has been my experience up until now. This is what all the indicator lights on my dashboard have been telling me. This is what all of the the feelings in my heart, or more likely my gut, or more likely my shoulders, are telling me. And it's time to say that's been the case up until now, and starting now, this. And so it's the same process, but it's not about telling God that we understand that we're worthless. It's about saying, well, this hasn't been working. I've been using the creative law. I've been inviting God to create something in my life that I haven't liked. So let me stop doing that. And I'll let myself off the hook for it. Yeah, I did that because I didn't know that I could do something different, or I didn't know that it was important to stop doing that.
It's I think you just used the word try something different, or I'm turning away from, and I used the idea of trying something different because the other thing wasn't working, and to feel okay with that. And then you think, because there's this piece that if I can be forgiven for this, I'll never do it again, and blah blah blah. I said, wait a minute, you know what? You got no bargaining chips with God, first of all.
Amen.
You just don't. Now, and in New Thought, there's no reason to bargain. It's not a game like that. But in traditional understanding, it's really, you don't have any bargaining chips. So if the first
That's right.
thing
Even if
didn't
we think
work-
that we're holding a full house and we're ready to make a bet, God knows that we got a full house.
yeah. So listen, let's just, and for me, it was like this. This ain't working anyway. I can be no worse off. I can be no worse off. And if God gets pissed, then I can revert back and say I'm sorry and whatever, and get back on track. But right now, this ain't working. And it has not been working. And I would like to explore something else. And if God is as cool as everybody says God is, and the Bible says God is, I shouldn't get crushed for this. So I'm going for it. Now, that's the way I think about things.
Yeah. So now, if God is asking you, if we're going to ask God for forgiveness, and we have already acknowledged that God is within, then who's first in line to give us forgiveness? Us.
Yeah.
We get to forgive ourselves. That's where the forgiveness, the surrender, the opening comes in. Because if we're going to be battling to have things that we've done before bring us a different result this time, I don't even have to say it. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
But then you said something really key, go back to the part where you said God is within. And you have to, the Bible says that. Like we are the temple of the living God, etc. But to
Yeah, it says that
really
once or twice, right?
yeah, but to get past that in terms of beyond the poetic saying of it, because it sounds very nice. But I always believe that until you get in the trenches, you really don't know what you believe. It comes out there. I read poetry to people all the time, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful. But it's when the stuff hits the fan that you really find out what you believe. So here's the thing. God is within. You like the scripture, even know where to find it. But then you pray to God as though God were not within.
Mm-hmm.
And, you hear me say sometimes, you got to stop and figure this out. You've got to decide before you proceed, or faith doesn't enter the picture. Either God is out there or God is within. Which is it going to be?
Mm-hmm. That's a key. And let's take a break. And when we resume, I will talk about why I think people like to have God outside.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marchiony's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
We're having a wonderful conversation about the difference between practical prayer and traditional prayer. And we kind of got down to the point where the key piece is understanding that God is within. Because if God is out there up in the sky, looking down, judging us, deciding what's going to happen to us, it is a completely different relationship between us and the infinite than if we understand that we are the temple of the living God, that the divine lives within us, that everything is God's creation, and that includes us. And it's so powerful to me to understand that that's the nature of the universe. That's why it's so often I get back into discussing creation stories, because everybody has a creation story and they're all saying the same thing, which is that God has created us by sharing itself as us, because there's nothing else, that it didn't start with any other raw materials. There's not God in a pile of stuff. No, that's not the story. And so there's this pervasive, and I say pervasive because there's 8 billion people on Earth, and there's not that huge a percentage that understands that the divine abides within. There's a pervasive belief or thought that God is outside of us. And I was going to tell you why people do that. And it's because it's easier. It's easier when things don't go the way that we like, when things are not to our preference. Then we can say, well, that's because God didn't want me to have it. Poor lowly me down here. I asked God for it in a prayer where I said, I know I don't deserve this, but could you please do me a solid and let me have this just once, and I promise I'll go to church afterwards. And then it doesn't show up, and it's like, well, God didn't want me to have it. God didn't believe that I was going to go to church, etc. And we get to blame God for the continued experience of life that we're having. And that doesn't sound really easy when I describe it. But the other choice is, whatever I'm experiencing is the creation of my consciousness. And if I want to change it, then I have to look within myself and change what I believe to open up to a new possibility so that the circumstances can change. There's a lot of responsibility in that. It's not even responsibility, it's accountability. I am creating my own life. Oh, geez, now what do I do?
First, you got to believe that you can or that you do. And I wouldn't, I don't take people all the way to the whole co-creative thing, because that's just too much to swallow at one time. But you can take it case by case and say, in this particular situation, can we track back what you might have been thinking at that time?
Yep.
What you might, and that sets the course for a different thought process, which seems to, and there's aha moments. And so that was a lucky one. How about this situation over here? Can you track that back?
Yep. Yeah. And when I'm working one-on-one with somebody, we definitely do that. It's the fact that this is a recorded podcast and it's available to everybody. I'm talking about the bigger principles. But yeah, when we get into a conversation and we talk about, here's the experience that I'm having that I don't like. Okay, what do you want to have instead? A lot of people, their circuits lock up when I get to what do you want to have instead. It's like, I've never considered what I want to have instead. I want that to stop. Okay, well, once the poverty stops, what does the prosperity look like? Is it just that you suddenly are, the anxiety and the heavy breathing and the sweating at the first of the month ends? Or is there actually plenty? Is there more than enough? Are you free to make some choices? Can you go take a different job? Can you do some volunteering? Can you quit your third job so that you can have free time with your family? I mean, there's a lot of things that are implied in what happens when we have that new experience. And then we get to dive into, well, what's bringing that about and where does that belief come from? And it's a very personal, individual thing for everybody.
It's the question that I like to ask is, what do you want? And, that kind of stops everything right there. Like, what do you want? One answer I get all the time is, I don't know, I never thought about it, or I don't know. And so,
right, well, that's the accountability we're talking about.
You still operate in, if this were grade school, you're still operating high school. Like, I'm saying, like, go back to grade school and say, what do you want?
What do you want? And if you don't know what you want, then how do you know that you've got it?
How do you know that you've got it? What are the possibilities? Why is it impossible? But first, do you want to own a Rita's franchise? Or do you want to be a vet? Or do you want, everything's a go.
Right.
So, you think about it and say, well, why can't you have that? And here's the thing. Sometimes I think we say things that we want, we know is so far out there. Like, they used to tell us, I'll never forget this. I was in the elementary school. You can be anything you want to be. You can be the president of the United States. I and everybody else believed that, right? In class and stuff. Right? Okay, so how do you say that that's not true? Here's the thing. President gets 4 years. You can go through the whole daggone school and everybody gets a turn and everybody will not get a turn. I mean, there's not that much time on earth. I mean, in life for everybody to have a turn. What do you really want? That's, yeah. And I don't want to say what's realistic, but come on. What do you want?
Yeah, you're getting into like some nuanced levels in this, and the phrase, the message that we have for the elementary school kids is that anybody can be president is true. Anybody can be president. Not everybody can be president, but anybody can be president. And the invitation there is, if that's really what you want, then you can set your sights on that and open to that possibility, and it is as likely for that elementary school kid to grow up and be president of the United States as anybody else. We've seen some unlikely people be president of the United States. We've seen some, I think, rather unqualified people be president of the United States, not the folks who I would have chosen out of my elementary school. However, The second thing that comes along in there is if somebody wants to be the president of the United States, why? What does that mean? What do they get by being the president? Once they're the president, what do they have? How do they feel? How is their life unfolding? Because it's very likely that all of the reasons that they want to be the president can unfold without them being the president.
I've been hanging around you too long because I was just right there before you said it, and you and you usually say, "So what would it be like? Like, what are the dynamics involved? Where would you live? Would you want to do this?" It reminds me of when I was little. That guys had 1,000 things I wanted to be, but I went through the thing. I want to be a nurse, and so my grandfather said, "Well, why do you want to be a nurse?" And I gave him all of these reasons why I help people. He said, "Can you help people any other way?" No, I want to be a nurse. He said, "Okay, well, to be a nurse, you have to first wash people, empty bedpans, do such and such and such." And I'm thinking, I ain't going to be no nurse. You got to be kidding. I got to do
nursing's off the table. We do something
That's
different
off the
instead.
Yeah, so that's sort of like what I think about when you say, you're examining the pieces of, well, it's easy to paint with a broad brush, but what does all that include? If you get it, you get everything. And exploring that is a good thing. I mean, I didn't know that you had to empty bedpans. And it's cool. I mean, empty bedpans are good, but not for everybody. Some people can't handle that. Some people can't handle blood, so you need people to help you think that through.
It's popular for kids to think, I want to be a fireman when I grow up, because there's the, carrying somebody safely from a burning building. And there's that, and it's wonderful, but that does not happen that often for firemen. If part of the dream is, I want to see if I can get to sleep with 11 other smelly men who are snoring, because that's who's at the firehouse, that's a different dream.
Yeah.
And nothing against firemen, everybody, we're playing our role and we're doing our thing, but there's a whole bunch of assumptions that go into all of that. I want to be a minister. Well, that's all about standing in front of the people and preaching the truth and getting the accolades and, having the offering baskets overflowing. And Pastor Carol, we have seen that that's not all there is to the program. Yes.
No, that's the easy part.
That's the fun part that makes it into the trailer.
And that even of only a few minutes out of the day, one day, whatever. Yeah. But
yes, a few minutes on Sunday morning and you still have the rest of the week. Yep.
One day, figure out how that fits in and we can talk about that. But, but yeah, it's about, I use the term taking your time and thinking it through. What does it really mean, this practical prayer? What will help me to ease in or understand the practical prayer? What will help build my faith in that this practical prayer direction is good? Is it cool? How does my faith blossom in this? And I think to me, it's beneath the surface. It's what is possible. There's nothing impossible for God. So therefore, it is possible for me to do this, this, and this. Well, I don't know. Then you got the imposter syndrome and all that other, I can't do it. I'm a perfectionist and I'm working my backside off to be perfect. And it's really, all of that stuff is a part of it. And I guess those come in those steps that you talk about. If it's not working, you got to go back to step two, not go back to step two, but step away. What do you call those?
Yep.
Step away and
you want to refute and reaffirm.
I spent so much time in the refutation part, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you spend a lot of time learning stuff that needs to be refuted now in order for a practical prayer to be practical for you. Let's take another break, and then we're going to do a prayer, a practical prayer on being aware of the power of yes that is within. Ooh. Are you ready to get results? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get results? RUR2GR. That's actually the abbreviation for the steps in a practical prayer. Recognition, unification, realization, gratitude, and release, with a couple of extra steps in there in case some doubt creeps in along the way. RUR2GR. This class is about the prayer technique that's common to all of the spiritual practices and religions in the most effective prayers that they have. And by effective, I mean that the prayer works. It actually creates a change in the experience of the person doing the prayer. It gets a result. We're going to begin with theory, and then we're going to take it into practice. By the end of the class, you will have your very own practical prayer that will help create transformation in your life.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. This conversation has been amazing.
This is wonderful, and it's not really a repeat of a conversation that we had 3 years ago, early on in the days of the podcast, because the target has shifted. The understanding that both of us have about traditional prayer and practical prayer is different. I have a much deeper understanding of traditional prayer and the stuff that we've been talking about. I think, Carol, you have a much deeper understanding and familiarity with what practical prayer is about. And they're different. Mm-hmm. They're different. And it's okay that they're different. And once we understand that they're different and how we can make use of whichever one it is that we're doing, there's a lot of power in that. Mm-hmm. So let's do a prayer on opening to the power within, that infinite creative power, that divine presence, that creative law that always says yes. It always says yes. That is the power within. And Ralph Waldo Emerson kind of summed it up, didn't tell us how to do it, but told us what was going on is that we need to get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits so that it can create something. Now, I'm not sure I like thinking of myself as a bloated nothingness, but if I have been interfering with the good showing up in my life, then yeah, there's definitely something to that. So as you're comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes. Turn away from the world around you. It is so easy to get distracted. The reason to close our eyes is so that we let loose our insistence that the things around us are more important than things within us. As we close our eyes, we become aware of that divine power within, understanding that there is one divine creative power. There is one source that has created everything. And there is a creation story in every religion and spiritual practice and tradition throughout history. Some of them just shrug it off, saying it's all God. Others have very specific instructions about in the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, let there be light, or in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word is that creative power. Or the Big Bang, which started out as a singularity that for whatever reason began expanding and evolving and unfolding and reacting within itself. And from that one, whichever story we're telling, everything has come. And everything continues to unfold, and everything continues to blossom. And that everything includes me and each one who is within the sound of my voice. That divine creative power abides within. It has been creating since the very beginning of time. It continues to create. It has created everything that we are and everything that we have experienced. It has also created everything that we're aware of, everything that we desire, everything that we wish to invite into our lives. The fact that we are aware of something that we desire, that we would like to experience, means that it can happen. It is certainly a possibility within that infinite creative presence. So as we get our bloated nothingness out of the way, as we let loose our disbelief that the good that I'm seeking can't possibly happen because of whatever reason, because somebody in my childhood convinced me that that wasn't possible, or I have a previous experience that's traumatized me to think that that can't possibly happen for me, or just a lifetime of envy thinking that good stuff only happens to people outside of me. That's our bloated nothingness. The belief that the good is not available to us is the part that's not true. Good and more good and more good is available to each of us in our own way. And not everybody gets the same recipe. Not everybody gets the same experience. Some people have a desire for one thing. Other people have a desire for something else. And it's even possible for us to have a desire for something, experience that, and then have a desire for something different or additional beyond that. Transformation happens right now in this moment. Everything in our experience has happened up until now. And if we're looking at our experience, thinking that that's going to indicate what our future is, that's like driving down the highway, looking in the rearview mirror. It's not going to show us where we're going. It's going to show us where we've been. So we get to choose a new destination. It might be more of the same. It might be, yes, more, please. Or it could be this, too, and something additional. Whatever that good is that we're seeking, it is available. So I'm now claiming it for each one. As we let loose our disbelief, as we open to new possibilities, that power within is saying yes. That infinite creative power that creates everything is saying yes, and it's bringing this good into our lives. More quickly, more richly, more joyously, more sweetly, more wonderfully than we have imagined up until now. Good unfolding for each in our own way. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good. I'm grateful for the willingness of each one to turn away from what's been and open to that new and allow that power within to say yes. And it says yes. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
That is the Practical Prayer Podcast, episode number 164, the redux of the difference between practical prayer and traditional prayer.
This was very much different than the original discussion.
This was very much different, yeah. And I would never have even tried to guess where the conversation is going to go. I just knew it was going to be different than last time.
I just wanted to make sure that we touched base with it again, because it's so much. You can't cover all of any of this in one podcast.
Yeah.
And it's just so vast, the information and that which, the knowledge that is available to us. It's amazing.
Yep. Well, to continue the swimming metaphor that I used before, because I went swimming earlier today, we swim on the surface. So if I'm swimming and the pool is 3 feet deep, the swimming experience is the same as I'm swimming in the ocean, which is 3,000 feet deep. And I've done both, and the swimming is pretty much the same, although there's a lot more depth that's available once we open ourselves to it.
Yeah. I like that. I was wondering where you were going, because I'm thinking at the ocean, how's that the same?
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's the same.
But I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. And I spend time scuba diving where you don't scuba dive at the top, you scuba dive at the bottom. So the experience of the same body of water is completely different for a scuba diver than it is for a swimmer. But it's the same water.
Same water. Yeah.
Same water.
Yeah. That analogy is excellent. I like that. Gonna have to include that in my stuff.
Yeah, and I found myself talking about scuba diving 2 or 3 times in the last couple of days, so wonder if it's time to go scuba diving again.
Why not?
I'm rusty and I live in Pennsylvania. I lived in Florida. I went scuba diving all the time.
Okay.
When I lived in Florida, I would drive my car down to the beach, park at the beach parking lot, grab my scuba gear out of the trunk, and walk out to the reef, pretty much. Can't do that in Philly. Can't even do that really in New Jersey.
I don't think
I mean, you
so.
can. It's just you can't see anything, and it's scary and cold.
I was going to say the water is very much different. I mean, it's beautiful. The environment, the atmosphere is beautiful, but it's just different. I can tell when I go to
My
different.
favorite saying of the New Jersey scuba divers is, "Hey, I could see my hand."
I have to look at the ocean as a whole when I'm there just to remember, because when you go to different islands and that image of beautiful waters and you have that, you can't compare. You just have to say this is this and that's that.
Yep. Yep. And I'm not going to get into details. I did grow up in New Jersey, going to the Jersey Shore as summer activities, so I'm not going to talk about that at all now. In fact, this is probably a great time to bring this episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast pre- and post-show on New Thought Media Network to a close. Thank you to everybody who is joining us on New Thought Media Network. If you have, again, a question or a comment, you can put it at bethelight.com, be-the-light.com. Let me see. Oh, there it is. I found a little thing. So there's the website that you can go to. You can put in a question or a comment or a prayer request there, and we are always delighted to hear from you. And we will be back again next Monday with more conversations. And even if we do a repeat of the same topic that we've covered before, it'll be different because it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.